place. I'm going to cover a quick introduction to my company and then go 3 topics which are shown here. So let me tell you first of all very little about what Geo is and what we do. You can read it up there in the slides, but in general we make a family of products which goes from the smallest, simplest system, which is around about 25 pounds, and which you could get from British Gas for free if you wish, right up to large-scale commercial systems in major offices. And really what we're trying to do is engage members of staff, people who use the buildings, and make it understanding and interesting for them. But enough about what we do. My topic here is actually to talk about something a bit more boring about carbon reduction strategies and so on. So the first one here is to look at some general strategies for reducing a building's carbon footprint. Now, I call this one an integrated strategy because what we've learned from going around a number of the businesses that we've been into, what they do, generally they start off with looking at their metering as a way to monitor and make better purchasing decisions and reduce the amount of energy which they're using there. And you will see quite a number of those companies around here today, and they will show you things a little bit like this, which gives you the view of how much energy that your electricity in this case you're using in a building over a 30-day period. And you can identify there the overnight loads, the out-of-hour loads, and that generally is what people are looking to reduce. But there is a limit to how far you can go with that, because you haven't got the detail to actually understand what is it that's causing that problem. The second thing they generally go and do is find somebody to take responsibility for it, appoint an energy manager or a facility manager to give that management focus. And probably what that person does is by going and looking at various types of controls, microgeneration, as a way to bring down the energy usage in the building. That effectively is taking people out of the loop, taking the problem away from people. And not only that a number of buildings, tenanted buildings that we've been to talk to and see, are quite limited in their ability to do things like this because it doesn't belong to them. There is a fourth part of this puzzle, as that little gap kind of shows, and that's what we do. How do you engage staff and get them to help you here? How do you enlist the help of people? And this, we think, is a complementary activity. We're not doing it instead of controls or energy management. It's doing it to help those, so that you can see how well they're working and spot when there are problems and things like that. So that's what we would call an integrated reduction strategy, looking at all 4 of those areas and seeing how you can get all of them working together in your business, in your particular situation. The second sort of strategy I'll talk about here is a staged carbon reduction strategy. The first part here is what we call reduce. This is very similar to what recycling has, and they've got this 3-stage model, so I thought I'd borrow it and use it here. So reduce is about how do you cut out that wastage. Quite often it's talked about as behaviour change, but actually when you get down to behaviour change, it's changing your habits so as to reduce wastage when you don't want to be using things. And quite often in a business, that is commercial, is outside of operating hours. It's the overnight loads. The second stage then is to look for those things which are using an awful lot of energy and improve the energy efficiency of them. So that's replacing things like, well, it's a story from my home, but I have seen it in business as well, that freezer that sits at the corner of the kitchen, purring away quite happily, but little do you know it's costing you £120 a year because it's a very inefficient freezer. And we have seen things like that in businesses. We've seen that with photocopiers and so on. So it's about replacing those elements. Things which you can do without going into the major full level of changing over to low energy lighting. And then the third element is putting in the renewables if you have that ability to do it. So that's the 3-stage strategy. Now let's look at how much those things cost. So yes, renewables are by far the most expensive of this. Replacement is quite expensive as well. Actually, the reduction, the energy behaviour change, the cutting out wastage should be the lowest cost of the lot. If you then look at the benefit side of it, my argument is that they're about the same. You can get the same degree of improvements from all three of those areas. So that would sort of argue that the cost benefit says, well, we should try reducing through the behaviour change first. But actually very few people do that in their businesses. Why is that? Well, because there's a difficulty side here. It is actually a darn sight easier to put in renewables, what I call fit and forget type of activities. You do it once, you put it in, and it's working for you. Replacement is a little bit more difficult because you have to make the decision of what things to replace and go and buy them and put them in and so on. But the reduction, the behaviour change is actually very difficult. It's a lot of people try to tackle it and actually don't get very far with it. So in effect, what we see in a lot of commercial businesses is the reverse here. So they start looking at renewables, then they look at replacing equipment, and only when they really have to do they look at behaviour change and start to address it. So what we're about is trying to change that difficulty for behaviour change. Because if we can make that easier, then the cost benefit actually works much better for the business. So that's the second strategy I would talk about. Now, the next part of what I want to talk about quickly is some research findings. As a business, because we put our houses on the line when we started up, we did quite a bit of market research, and that has instructed us on how we should make our business and make it work. So I'm going to share some of those findings with you today. Now, that research was done probably about 3 years ago now. It was done primarily looking at domestic markets, but we also looked at the commercial market as well. And it was both qualitative and quantitative research. And I have to thank the East of England Development Agency for paying for it, which was very good. And I can recommend that for people who were thinking of this. So what was the level of interest that we found? And what is quite striking about this, and we're talking here about individuals in the business, that both the motivation for cost and for carbon are high. Now, that was quite surprising for us when we double-checked it with all the businesses. But yes, people do consider cost in the business. They aren't just there to spend the company's business their money. They do take that quite seriously, especially in those businesses which incentivize them. So there's a high level of interest in doing this, and we've seen that carried out, borne out in the 3 years we've been doing this. Let's then look at functionality, and we looked here at what sort of displays would they like. Would it be about images, or was it about words? Is it about graphs? Is it about dials? What is it that people like? And you can see and read the answers there. But really what came up as the final thing about this, and this is what we have done for all the time that we've been doing it. You have to give 2 levels of information here. You have to give that at-a-glance information, that simple, real-time, quick look, how am I doing? And then you also have to give more detailed information for periodic scrutiny, so that people can go down, dig in, and start to look at the causes of what's happening. And obviously it's important about how you present that information, so it's not techie speak, but it's actually people speak. Another area we looked at was analysis packages, analysis software, and yes, it's all part and parcel of the service, and yes, that has got quite strong support as well, so we do that too. And the final bit I'll show you here is looking at the overall response. Livewire you see up there, that was a code name we were using for our product at the time. And it sums up really what we have found, that in businesses there is actually a very positive response to it. That's response from members of staff, people in the business. So if you go back to that where I started about the difficulty of this, the difficulty does not lie in the fact that people don't want to do it. They do. They just don't get the information in the manner that is of use to them. So, the third part of what I'm talking about are some practical considerations about what does that really mean. I have 5 principles which I use in the business for this one. The first one is relevance. It's actually no use whatsoever putting a public display in your foyer telling you how much the building is using or how much it is generating. It goes straight over the top of most people's head because it has absolutely no relevance to them, unless they happen to be the finance director. Give them information about their office, and is their office using more electricity or heating than anybody else? Then it starts to bite. So the key to this, with staff, getting staff engaged, is local information, bringing it down to the level of the individual. Having got it down to the level of the individual, you've got to engage them. It's no good putting something up which says this office is using 2.9 kilowatts, because what does that mean? Is that good? Is it bad? Or whatever. So you have to give it not only simple at a glance information, but it has to be easy to understand. What is that telling you? Is that good or